You crank it out. You really do. You crank it out, and you do Jerusalem Dateline.
Yeah, we do Jerusalem Dateline twice a week, Tuesdays and Fridays, and we do usually a daily program, a daily story for the 700 Club, and we do things on YouTube, YouTube Live. We do usually live shots for what's called News Watch, which is on cbnnews.com. So we just try, as much as we can, try to keep up with the news, try to give a truthful and biblical perspective on what's happening, historical perspective to what people need to know. And
But even when you call it a biblical perspective, I mean, even if someone's an atheist, it's still your news reporting is the only place that they can get a straight, unencumbered. I've heard it said in the Society of Professional Journalists. I was told, well, this is what the news editors want us to do, that they don't really want them to do. I don't want to put you on the spot, but don't the reporters also have a bias in their reporting?
Well, it seems like many of them do. You kind of can see that sometimes in maybe a press conference, or the kind of questions that are asked, or the tone of the questions. I mean, one historical example I remember way back in 2005, when there was a disengagement, when they were going to pull out about 9,000 Jews from Gaza.
Gush Katif, yeah.
Gush Katif, yeah, 21.
2005.
Which led actually to what happened on October 7th. But the tone of the questions and the animus behind the questions were palpable. The press conference I'm referring to is when there was a spokesman from Gush Katif explaining why the disengagement was bad. And he warned that Gush Katif was the finger in the dike to terror. And that's exactly what happened. So the bias is there in some journalists and some news agencies. But we try, I think from our perspective, we really stood on the shoulders of Pat Robertson and currently Gordon Robertson, and who, Pat in particular, was a pioneer in standing with Israel and presenting what I believe was a truthful picture of Israel and an understanding of the enemies that were coming against the state of Israel and the Jewish people.
Why is it so hard for CNN or NBC or the major networks, and you probably know these guys, maybe you even share cameramen?
Yeah, in fact, we've used a cameraman that used to work for CNN, and actually right now he's working for the Office of the President. He got laid off from CNN. Yes, we do meet some of these guys and get to know them, and I don't know necessarily why the bias. I'll give you an example. Not in October 7th, but there were several wars with Hamas before October 7th. There was 2012, 2014, 2021. And one of those wars, and I think it was around 2014, I couldn't get over why they were blaming Israel. And Israel seemed to be the bad guy. And I'm thinking, what am I missing? What are they missing? And the same thing with Lebanon and Hezbollah. It's like, don't you realize who the good guys here and who the bad guys? And it seemed to be a blindness, or I don't know if it was willful, but it just seemed, don't you realize that Israel, and it's also a movie that's played over and over, where Hamas or Hezbollah may attack, Israel responds, people may unfortunately, tragically die, and then Israel gets the blame. It's a strategy that Hezbollah and Hamas have used over and over. Sadly, it works much because of the media.
Well, exactly, and it isn't as if Arafat didn't perfect this, sacrificing Palestinian civilians in order to evoke humanitarian aid, which he steals.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of compounded the way that Arafat was sort of a master at this, by manipulating the media, by playing the victim, by sort of goading Israel into situations that he could turn around and blame Israel. And sadly, some of the media, much of the world's media, just plays into that game. and sort of puts Israel as the bad guy.
You say some. I think it's most. You're the exception, and it must be. I mean, don't you find yourself like here as a press conference? Don't you find yourself at a press conference, and you saw the report, you saw what the news is, and then I don't know if you watch others' reports, but then theirs is like completely negative, and yours is pretty objective.
Yeah, sometimes. Yeah, you think, what are they missing, or what am I missing? Yeah. So yeah, you kind of wonder what they're seeing. And there was an example, I believe, in Jenin during the Second Intifada, where there was a large-scale operation there, and the claim was, and this is way back in the Intifada, the claim was that like 500 Palestinians were killed. There was a mass grave, and all these innocent Palestinians. Well, it turned out it was a major operation by Israel and to try to root out some of the terror groups. Most of the people that died, about 50-some people, were terrorists. And we got to go right there in the epicenter where it was, and it was nothing like it had been reported. People need to know that for the most part, Israel is a country that you are able to go almost anywhere to report. There's very little censorship, if any, and the exception would be Al Jazeera, where they. But they're so egregious in what they've done. So it was. I think any country would have done the same.
What about the media culpability for the demonstrations? And I know that there's an organized movement in London, in Berlin, in New York for these anti-Israel. They call them anti-Israel, but ultimately they're anti-Semitic.
Yeah.
These demonstrations and the animus of turning the population against Israel and in favor of Hamas as victims, even knowing that it's really a racket.
Yeah, I think maybe what's missing sometimes in the reporting is that it's not just some organic, spontaneous rally that doesn't have any organization behind it, any funding behind it, but it does. And those mass rallies started days after October 7th.
That's right.
And there was funding behind it, there was organizations behind it, there was even apparently planning behind it even before October 7th. So that by itself really puts a whole different perspective on the rallies themselves. And it seems like many people have been swept up in that anti-Semitic rallies and perspective, globally.
Do you have a theory why this is happening? Like there's almost a complicity. I could say a conspiracy to let this happen. I mean, obviously the demonstrations seemed like, that it was connected to, they knew that they should be a day later, right?
Yeah.
But that the media is somehow tied into it for political purposes?
Well, I don't know how much the media is maybe part of it, of the any sort of conspiracy. But you do have the funding, you have the organizations, you have the planning, and then you have, as one rabbi described it to me, October 7th was sort of like this illumination, sort of like that illuminated flare in a battlefield, and that exposed anti-Semitism that was there all along, but it just had an opportunity to tie itself to these rallies, and so, which is very concerning. This kind of anti-Semitic that just has risen up around the world. Very concerning.
It has to be tough for you after how many, 25 years there?
24,
Yeah.
almost 25.
Now there's a channel called I-24.
Yeah.
And by the way, they've cut back their English language reporting, so that's why your concise, concatenated report is so important.
Well, we try to be truthful, faithful, and keep reporting on what's happening. And we have quite a faithful, committed team that wants to tell the story of Israel for such a time as this. And we feel it's more than a job; it's a calling to help. And to your point earlier, we've one of the things that encourages us so much is that when we find out that our Jewish friends are watching, and we find that tremendously encouraging.
I think Jewish Americans, they owe a debt of gratitude to the 700 Club, to CBN News, to what's his name, Al in Virginia Beach, to Dale Hurd, and for reporting the threats against Judeo-Christianity.
Yeah.
Certainly. And you're like an oasis. It's like that photo of they show all the people at the Nazi rally, and one guy didn't raise his hand. It's like you.
Well, we hope to be that person, that one person, if we can. That's a real honor and privilege. Dale does an amazing job in his reporting. So many others, Gary Lane. It's
you got the two other guys working with you.
Yeah, we have Julie Stahl and we have John Waggies there for analysis. Paul Strand is doing report. Yeah. So it's a wonderful team to be working together for such a time as this, as it says.